So, hello to my esteemed guests, and hello to everyone out there in the world at large. Welcome to this panel for Jeunesse Musicale International's What Can Music Do festival, popping up on the weekend of 20th and 21st of June 2020 for World Music Day, Fête de la Musique. So, this panel is going to be looking at the idea, IDEA, of inclusion, diversity, equality, and accessibility. And we're going to be asking ourselves the question, how can music connect us all across boundaries? I am absolutely thrilled and honored to be joined by three esteemed guests. My name is Omar, I should also say. I'm a composer based in Paris. My esteemed guests are Keshav Suri, Sophie Sondervik Seter, and Helena Isaacson Beck. How are you guys? Where are you calling from? How are you today? Should we start with Helena? How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. I'm calling from a sunny Sweden, and I'm so happy to join you.
Thank you so much. Keshav, how are you?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me. I'm calling from New Delhi, India, and I mean it's one day is good, one day is bad. So today is a good day. You caught me on a good day.
That's good. Really glad to hear that. Thank you so much. And Sophie,
Hi, I'm excited to be here sharing this space with y'all. So yeah, I'm very good.
amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, I completely echo this sentiment of excitement. I'm just going to do a tour of introducing you guys. Please let me know if I've introduced you correctly. There'll be more to add, I'm sure. But I'll start with Keshav. Keshav, you are an executive director of one of the world's premier hotel and hospitality groups, and you've used your creativity and skill, if I may say so, to pioneer responsible entrepreneurship and even legal and political activism, it seems. So I'll be interested to hear about what motivates you to make the changes that you've made or attempted to challenge in spite of the pushback or challenges you've seen, how you've come to your place of mission and how music and culture factor into your activism. Helena, your work with songlines as well as your own disciplines. Well, you transcend a lot of disciplines. You're an artist, a filmmaker, editor, program director, and your work transcends national boundaries as well. So I'm imagining that you'll be able to give us a perspective on a lot of different kind of world issues from various different roles, and I'll be really interested to hear how your philosophy impacts your activities in your daily work. And similarly with Sophie, as a musician and a leading member of a global movement for girls rock, you seem to take actions to promote, if I may say so, a new generation of musical heroines, both locally and internationally. And I'm really curious as to what drives you, and really curious about your perspectives on what you think artists can do to make a positive difference in the world. I hope that kind of summarizes what you guys do, but I'd like to ask you individually to maybe say a little bit about what you do, how you've come to do what you do, and where. So maybe if I could start with Keshav.
Sure. Hi. So I hate talking about myself. But now that you brought up the bid on the political and social activism, yes, I did file a writ petition for the decriminalization of homosexuality. But I was one of many. I wasn't the only one. It's been a big, long battle in India, and we just got decriminalized 2 years ago. So that's great. But of course, that means that we have a long way to go for further rights. We've just been told that we're no longer criminals. It does not mean that we've been given any further rights. Of course, the Supreme Court in the United States just came up with the non-discrimination at the workspace, which hopefully is something that we will emulate here in India. At some point, we'll get there. We'll also get to marriage equality. I'm married. I'm married to a Frenchman, by the way. So I mean, I understand the pains of being, Indian and French, and and especially for a French person to live in India at this time right now. Yeah. So imagine that at home. But I'm hoping that we're really moving towards an equal world when it comes to the LGBTQI plus community in India. We've got a very, very historic trans community that has been a part of our culture for a very long time. In fact, the trans community actually got their rights 5 years before the LGB community. Having said that, that does not mean that they got societal acceptance. And currently, with the quarantining that's happened, we've realized how the sub-minorities in the LGBTQI plus community, how vulnerable, how it's really time that we came together, and how there are so many communities that are so vulnerable within the sub-minorities. And now it sort of, has lit a fire a little bit in our ass, that we wish that we would have had the equality the rest of the country in the heteronormative country had, because then maybe we would have been part of some of the welfare schemes and some of the social schemes that were announced in stimulus packages in India. And so I think it's a bit of a wake-up call for us to fight for further rights, and I'm ready to do that with our foundation. And of course, I know that everyone hates the word mainstreaming or normalizing, but I think that that's something that is very important, at least in our culture here in India, because we really look at art and music and Bollywood, and that forms a big part of our sort of culture, because we're very in it's, again, ancient culture, so it's something that we really look into. And so that sort of movement will help our community to basically be sort of normalized.
That's really very exciting in terms of a sense of progress that you see. And can I just ask a little bit about the Keshav Suri Foundation and the work that it does? A little bit more focused.
Sure. For sure. So our motto is embrace, empower, mainstream the queer community. I know it sounds like fluff, but these can be very sort of powerful words, especially right now. When we can't physically embrace, our own family, and but at the same time, we can do it via the power of internet, and we can do it via the social media, and of course. So important to empower our community. And again, this comes back to, yes, there is a conversation of affirmative action versus meritocracy versus merit. But at the same time, when you have such a deeply marginalized community for so many years, when we've just been decriminalized, even when the trans community has rights on paper, there are no jobs available. There is no empowerment that is available economically. And then again, when it comes to the fact that, we're not even there on the social welfare schemes. And then mainstreaming, like I just discussed about what needs to be done. So our foundation takes, not just, says these words, but also tries to work on making sure this happens. So through the Lalit, we probably the highest employers of openly out queer people in the country. Even though we're a very small brand, of the hotel chains are very, very small as compared to the big players, but we have a team that is so empowered that they are comfortable enough to come out, again, in a sort of culture which has not been maybe the most progressive when it comes to the LGBTQI plus community. Of course, we also now realize the power of mental health. And so we're doing a lot of work on mental health. We offer free mental health care services. And then we realize the importance of having these conversations. And since the quarantine, we started feeding centers across all the hotels, not just for the laborers, but also to reach out to the trans community, and especially the trans community that does sex work and that is on the streets also begging, because they also form a huge part of our community. And of course, because of the lockdowns and just this pandemic, they have just been, push to no work at all. And so our aim was to reach out to them to make sure that they had enough money in their bank accounts, or the ones who didn't have bank accounts had cash available to them. And then on top of that, also to make sure that they had food and food supplies that would last them, and it's still going on, because in India, we haven't reached the peak yet. And so there's a lot more that needs to be done that we're hoping that we're doing. Sorry.
So many strands, so many strings to the bow of of the violin that you're playing in this foundation. It's fascinating. Maybe if I can invite Sophie and to expound on some of your work as well, because it seems kind of linked in different ways.
Yes, thanks. And thanks, Keshav. That was really interesting, hearing about the work you're doing. My kind of foundation is working in the Norwegian brand of Jeunesse Musicale. So I'm in Jeunesse Musicale Norway, and we work in a very project-based way. And the way our project, one of the projects I'm probably gonna talk mostly about today, the way it started was kind of that I myself, as a musician, and many of my fellow musicians in my age group kind of saw, first of all, that there were less female musicians, especially in the rhythmic genres. And also we saw that there was kind of missing something in a young age group. So we started trying to learn about the girls rock camp concept from other countries. And internationally, it's still known as Girls Rock Camp, but in Norway, it's actually called Loud, because we are trying to kind of phase out the specific having the girls in the name, because we want to be completely inclusive of trans and non-binary youth also. So it's actually for girls, trans, and non-binary youth. And so it started from this position of wanting to recruit girls, basically. And then the more we've worked with this project, we've all obviously become incredibly aware of how privileged we are, even though we felt marginalized in some sectors of music life and music business, we were still incredibly privileged in so many aspects. So we've started focusing more in each year, each round, on marginalized communities within girls, or what you might call it. So working on accessibility for physical and mentally or neurodiverse people, and obviously working on trans inclusion actively, on anti-racism, and also being accessible across like socio-economic backgrounds. So that's kind of like the quick tour of the Girls Rock Camp movement, I guess. And yeah, just I feel very lucky working with it, because I get to kind of fuse the arenas of working with arts and music and also activism, because you can discover working with Girls Rock Camps that there are these two big global movements that have fused together. Like half of them started in activism and found arts and music as a tool for activism, and half of us started in music and the arts and kind of found our way into activism through those music projects. And then we're just kind of always merging into this big movement, I guess.
I think that makes sense. That resonates with I think with a lot of what our panelists will be feeling in terms of this approach. But I'm really interested what you say about this kind of people who start with activism and people who start with the arts, and how they merge. We'll pick up on that later, maybe. Helena, can you say a little bit more about your work and your projects? Oh, there's no microphone yet.
There we go. Can I also share screen with you? That's okay. Yeah, because then, okay, no, host disabled and attendee screen sharing. Never mind. I have some pictures I thought I could show you otherwise, but because I've been working with a film, actually, transgender film as well, which have been going around the world. But this project, Songlines, is not about that. But I'm a filmmaker from the beginning, so I jumped into this music world, and it was actually new to me. But Songlines has been a project under Jeunesse Musicale for 3 years, and we're working with those methods that Jeunesse Musicale have been working with for 60 years. Making a difference through music, using the power of music to bridge across social, geographical, racial, and economic divides, and create a platform for intercultural dialogue. As you know, there were many young refugees coming to Sweden in 2015, and we started in 2017 to work with all these wonderful persons coming to our countries. So we have built orchestras and choirs and camps, and had a great time together for 3 years now. And we try to continue that way in different parts of Sweden.
Fantastic. And maybe, please, if we might be able to add in images later in the edit. So can you explain the video work that you do as well?
Well, I am a journalist and a filmmaker from start, and I've been working with human rights issues. And it's very interesting to hear what you're doing, Keshav, because that was what I was doing right before I jumped into this project, because all these questions, I think we need to work on all the human rights issues at the same time. We can't just work with women's rights and only LGBT rights or refugee rights. We need to work together with all the rights. And I think that's it's a very important part of the Songlines work as well.
Before I ask any further questions on, this is the first question that comes up into my head. I realize that we all have the kind of role activist in our list of things that we do. And I think that's remarkable, especially from what you say, Sophie, about some people feel like they are an activist, and some people feel like maybe they are a musician or an entrepreneur for Keshav or a journalist for Helena. But what does it mean to be an activist, and how does it mean something to you, or does it mean many things or nothing? Sophie, if I start with you.
I think it means kind of this like core sense of mission and responsibility, kind of that you kind of have to bring with you into whatever it is you're doing, like whether it's, you know, a festival you're organizing or a band you're putting together, or you know, just a workshop. You have to kind of like have this mission with you, and it's not something you just like pick and choose from one day to another, or from one you know, project to another. It's kind of this drive. Yeah, and it's also, I think, being very you know, being knowing that you don't know everything, and that there will be new causes and things you have to learn and discover. And yeah.
Keshav, if I invite you to reflect on that.
I echo exactly what Sophie said. I don't think I can put it better. I think exactly what she said. It's just that for myself, sometimes I feel like, you know, people say that I'm an activist, and I sometimes find that, you know, maybe the word in itself encompasses so much, and there are so many people that have been doing this for so many years, and then you suddenly be like, "Oh, but I don't know if you're even living up to that expectation. Are you demeaning it by putting yourself in the same league as so many legends that have been really at the forefront of so much that's going on even now?" So I get nervous whenever anybody says that. So that's just my take.
There's a lot of nodding heads here. Helena, what do you respond to that?
As a journalist, I'm a bit careful with using that word, actually. And as well in Sweden, we have this very polarized discussion in the society right now. And it's really difficult to discuss all these things. We have the activists on one side and maybe I don't know, who are the others on the other side? Are they the racists, or who are they? So it's actually a bit tricky as well to use the word, because it might sometimes divide people as well. But I mean, we are all working for the same cause. It's the human rights cause, and I think it's very important to stay focused on that.
I like what you say, particularly because it feels like what all of you have said actually kind of removes the capital A from activist. In a way, we can all take action for things that we believe in whatever that we are doing, whether we are a musician or a journalist or running a business and hotels. We can all take daily action, even over dinner maybe. So I'm interested to know in what motivates you to take this action, or what has motivated you to take the actions that you've taken, and how has music been the tool or the goal, or how does music enter your actions, and what's the motivation? Maybe if I start with Helena.
Yeah, what I think it's like my life always goes into circles in some way. I mean, this with young people and their rights and everything, it always comes back to me in one way or another. And when you start doing these things, you see so many unfair things and you just dig into them even more. And I think when all these 35,000 unaccompanied young people came to Sweden, and as many young persons with their families came to Sweden, I thought we'd need to do something. And I met with these musicians who wanted to do these things as well. And of course, music is a tool, but music is also language, which is different. So when I got into this music world in Sweden, I thought it was pretty difficult, actually, because in the film world, I think it's very international, but the music world is very westernized. We don't know much about Bollywood music or Afghan pop or whatever. It's nobody knows, because we are so United States orientated, or in English speaking language music orientated. So we don't really know all these things. And when you go into culture schools, it's always, we have a very narrow picture of what music is in our country. So we try to make orchestras, and we have participants from all over the world. So there might be Congolesian pop, or there might be Afghan traditional, or Syrian violin, whatever. And we try to make music from that. And I wish our societies looked like that we could really play our own songs and make them look and sound good together, So that's kind of a picture of a good society, I think. If we take the differences and we put it together into something beautiful.
Social harmony, you could call it.
Yeah.
Harmonizing with society. So that's really interesting. You mentioned the different cultures and the different language of music and transcending that to come together. Um, Maybe Sophie, does that resonate with some of the work that you do with the with Loud?
It does. It really does. And I think I've uh, I've had some of those same challenges. I think when it comes to what kind of music you're working with, and like the Western dominance. And I think for us, like one type of direction we have tried to kind of go to work with that is to focus on music as a form of expression. So in our methods in the girls rock camps, we focus a lot on creating spaces where you have the practical, physical, and the mental safety to try to express yourselves through music, even before you maybe know music. So in a lot of music teaching for young people, it's about like first becoming the expert, and learning all of Western music history, or whatever, all bands from the 70s, if that's the genre, and that kind of narrows down a lot what then opportunities you will have for the music you create. Like having that whole baggage of everything that's been done before and all the rules and everything. So we try to create a space where you can kind of be the expert of your own music, even though you're not the expert of anything else, and just in a couple of days become a songwriter or a musician, or even now like a producer, a remixer. Yeah, I don't know if that answered at all. That was just like where my mind went.
Very interesting. I have to say, I wrote down to become an expert of your own music. How poetic and beautiful is that? It's just absolutely wonderful. Kishav, maybe if I invite you to share also a little bit about how music, how you've been able to use music in terms of social justice or your mission generally.
So I completely echo what Sophie said when she said that, music was a way of expression, because when I was a kid, I used to express myself through music. And the way I expressed my sexuality sometimes with my parents was through music. And I was in an all boys Catholic school, and we did drag at a very young age, and it was accepted. So, I did a lot of musical theater there. And then as I was growing up, and when my activism started, it's actually started on the day when we. So I don't know a little bit. I'm going to give you a little bit of a history lesson on just the queer rights in India right now. So in 2009, the High Court had actually decriminalized homosexuality, and then in 2013, the Supreme Court recriminalized us. So it was actually when the Supreme Court judges actually turned around and said, who are these gay and lesbian people? Do you know any? They form a minuscule minority of this very large country, and therefore they don't need this. And that's actually, by then I had opened my nightclub, which was Kitty Sue, which by then had, drag artists, queer artists, and all sorts of artists from just not India, but all over the world. And it was like a sort of melting pot. It wasn't just a queer club, or just a gay club, or just a lesbian club, or just a straight club. It was basically everybody together. Going with what Helena was also saying about actually, it was that, and I'm hoping that when things get better, it goes back to that. And the day that day was when we got recriminalized, was when I actually woke up and I said, no, I think it's time for privileged people like me to speak up, to do things, and not just basically go file a writ, but also make sure that what I'm filing in the writ, I have put my money where my mouth is, and made sure that I've actually created safe spaces, make sure that I've actually done the work. and been on the front line as much as I could. And then the day when the decriminalization happened, we had a giant party back at Kirisu, where you had basically, it was a music fest, and it didn't matter if the songs were just Bollywood or Beyonce or Madonna or Shah Rukh Khan. Everything was played and everyone was just there happy. And again, it wasn't just an LGB thing, it was basically everyone together. We had people who were differently able, we had acid attack survivors, because we work very closely as well with the hotels and the foundation. And that was the night that I think music also and this celebration brought everyone together.
God, I wish I was there. That sounds like the best party I've ever heard. I mean, and that sense of celebration. I mean, it's palpably joyful. I mean, we weren't there, and I can feel how amazing that was. Um, it sounds. I'm really interested also in what you describe about a moment of kind of awakening. Like, you described that you were responding, I suppose, to the conditions, and then there came a moment where you realized, oh, it's not enough to respond. I have to act. Would that be pretty fair to say? I wonder if this is a similar kind of story for the other panelists. Helena, I don't know if what was it that instigated you into doing what you're doing, going where you're going, fighting the fight you're fighting?
With song lines, you mean? I mean, for us, the starting point was the refugee, the refugees coming to our country, and I think many of us thought that we need to do something. We need to do something, and when it comes to music and to express yourself, I would also like to say that some people are not allowed to express themselves with music. So we've faced that as well. So we have been working a lot around music, because if you want to work with inclusion, you need to understand the language of another person. So we have been, for example, been working with text and with mother tongue text, and then translated it into other languages, for example, Swedish, to practice the language, but also to understand everything, because the nuances, everything, it's very difficult to express yourself when you don't have the language with you. And music is a way of expressing yourself if you're allowed to. And if you're not allowed to, maybe we have to work with other things. We can work with food, we can work with parties, we can work with different kinds of culture around the music and make a big party out of that. Some can show their art, some can work with the sound, with the lights, with other things. So that's what we have been forced to do, because it's not everyone who is actually, it's not their tool. The instrument is not, but still music means something to everyone. For example, I met some Eritrean girls and they are not allowed to sing outside church. So we need to work in another way. So we worked with text, for example, and then someone else maybe can sing that song that came out as a poem from one of the girls. So we can work around that all the time. So maybe that didn't really answer the question, but it was, I just wanted to continue this with the language, the music language and expression that is also a bit complicated sometimes, but very powerful when you can work with it as an instrument for inclusion.
Sophie, do you have a response to that?
Yeah, it's so big, like you can we've had those same experiences, of course, in some groups, and I think finding all the culture that comes around music is incredibly important. Like you mentioned, food and dance, and yeah, it can be 1,000 different things. But I also the kind of the inspiration thing also got me thinking, like trying to trace back kind of, it's hard to know like when the inspiration or the drive or whatever kind of starts, but I think seeing the kind of transformational power that either music or those other art forms can have, just seeing that kind of, it creates this realm of possibility where you see how much is possible, and also with that kind of responsibility, I guess, because you see like, okay, if we have these just like the basic, if we have these like 30 girls here who like in 1 week have changed from shy, careful, polite to just like confident and empowered young people through the tools that you have accessible, then you like the next step is to think, okay, but then who else needs access to this arena and to these tools and to this safety and to all this empowerment? And then that kind of sense of possibility and responsibility, it kind of becomes a drive, I guess, for the next project whenever you discover marginalization or discrimination or whatever it might be.
I'm really interested on following a little bit what you're saying, Sophie, and asking this question to all of the panelists as well. Do you have like a specific story or an example that you've lived, something that when you think of what you're describing a general trend of possibility, but there must be one person that represents that story for you. Can you think of like of opening up a potential or crossing of transcending boundaries? So I guess I invite you all to can you share a story like that of a person that you've seen realize this potential? Helena, you're nodding enthusiastically.
Yes, I have many stories like that actually, but I would like to tell you about Ehsan, who came here from Afghanistan or Iran, and he came to Sweden, and he had never seen a piano, and he came to this special home for young refugees, and he saw this piano, and he started to think, well, maybe I could play that instrument. And he started to listen to YouTube clips, and he heard Beethoven and Mozart and all these things. And most of the Afghan guys I met here and girls, they are very interested in Afghan music, but he was like, I don't like that. I don't want that. So the home where he lived, they arranged so he could have a teacher. And the teacher came, and he tried, and it didn't really work out. So the teacher said, well, I'm sorry, but you will not be able to learn this. And Ehsan was so devastated, and he was so sad, and he was like, I really want to sound like the guys and girls playing on YouTube. I want that beauty into my life. So he started to, try, and watching these YouTube videos, and it didn't work out. And then suddenly he got something right and something more, and he practiced for 10 hours a day. And suddenly he sat in school and played, and some school teacher came up and said, do you want to play? We have this summer thing going on. So he said, well, maybe. And so they let him up on the scene, and there were applause, and he thought, wow, could this really be? And so, we got this Sting Polar Prize donation, 2017, 2018, Ehsan and another guy was playing on that scene in front of all the audience for the Polar Prize for the next year, beautifully. And that is actually on YouTube, so you can listen to it. So it's so beautiful. And now he has also made a composition that we have recorded down here in Kalmar, where I live, together with our orchestra here. And I made a little music video from that. And that really shows, I mean, the power of Esan's courage to do these things. I think it's amazing.
Wow, that's a really moving, very moving story. Keshav, I wonder if you have, in the work that you've done, even with the people that you've been working with, collaborations, a similar story of.
So I have two, I guess I would call them inspirations. One was Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi, who was one of the very few, and again, it's sad that we have an ancient trance culture, but very few mainstream trance artists that are classical dancers. So she was one of the first few who sort of broke that stereotype and started dancing in Bharatnatyam, and is a classical trained dancer in Bharatnatyam. And when I saw her on TV, and when I saw her, I was like, wow, taken aback. Because it's funny, because a lot of the dance forms in India actually merge their binaries of gender. So you have a lot of women who do the male roles and the male who do the women's role. And then there is, of course, the Ardhanarishwar, which is the man-woman, a god, goddess. But at the same time, you don't have that many trans people who are given the opportunity to do those roles. And so I think Lakshmi, and then of course there are others and who've also won awards, but I think she really did that for me. And Divine, the goddess that broke so many. I mean, even if she was American, but the fact that the movies that they did in Hairspray, when Hairspray came out, I was like, wow, subversion at its best, and really the first ever drag superstar couldn't sing. I don't know if you've ever heard of Divine's songs or couldn't sing at all to save her life, but what fantastic songs. I mean, I was listening to it when I was a kid, and I was like, that gives me hope. Maybe one day I'll become a singer.
Wow. I love the idea of by being, again, I guess, being an expert of your own music. Divine was an expert of her own music.
Yeah, it was special kind of music, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sophie, do you have a story to share on this?
Well, I mean, it's when you've been working in this world for a while, it's really hard to kind of choose stories and people. But I also work with this exchange for young musicians between Norway, Mozambique, Malawi, and Brazil. And through this, we've been able to have volunteers from Mozambique at the Girls Rock camps in Norway. And after a couple of rounds, they wanted to start up a similar type of project in Mozambique. So I was fortunate to be able to go there and to contribute in the leader trainings and the planning of the first Girls Rock camp in Mozambique, outside the capital, Maputo. And I mean, of course, like that was mind-blowing in so many ways. It was just such an honor to be able to be there. But on the day that the camp was supposed to begin, some of the parents showed up at the school that was the pickup point. And especially some of the fathers, they actually didn't want their daughters to go after all. And they had stuff that they had to do at home, and it didn't work out, and maybe they hadn't signed the permission slip at all, and etc. There was a lot of challenges, and these volunteers working or organizers working on the camp, they were there and like argued with the parents and actually kind of made it happen. Really, like you wouldn't think it was possible, but they were able to argue and make it happen. And so we had this camp. They wrote their own songs, they practiced. Everything was like any Girls Rock camp anywhere in the world. chaotic and noisy and great. But the really cool thing is that the finishing concert we came back to the school where they had been picked up, and we rigged up everything there in the schoolyard and everything. And all the parents came to watch, even the parents who were like really skeptic and didn't want their kids to go at all. And you could just see that they were just like mind blown. They were just like, oh shit, like our kids can do this. This is insane. You know, they were there like these tiny girls with their like drum kits and playing these gigantic basses and everything on the songs that they had actually made themselves. And it was just this image of how transformative it can be, both for these kids and for their families, their communities. Just seeing this like display of power in the middle of the schoolyard. So I think that was a moment for me that kind of gave me like a new, like, okay, shit, like this works, and this is something to continue working with, I guess.
That's so amazing. What I love also is it touches on, I guess, my kind of last question, because this time has flown by. My question is, what do you feel are the challenges that are ahead in terms of creating more of those opportunities that you've just seen and more of those inspirations that we've discussed? What are the challenges, and what do you think we need to overcome them? Easy questions. Easy question for the end. So as that kind of sinks in, maybe Keshav, can I invite you to reflect on that? What are the challenges that you see to fulfilling this potential for growth, and what do you think
Vaccine. I think let's start with the vaccine.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, because we're actually concerned as to, will we be able to go to concerts anymore? Will we be able to go to parties anymore? Will it, even if the vaccine comes, will there be another pandemic? What's the future like for nightclubs? These are conversations I'm having with my own team. And then how do we take maybe the brand and put it virtual? Now, what's happening with the virtual world is that there is so much of content that is there. Everyone is watching it for a couple of seconds and then moving on and moving on. So how do you make sure that the content that we're creating, especially when it comes to music and the art form and various art forms, how do we hold the attention of the audience? And on the other side, on the brighter side, it's a much larger audience, and it's, when I did some of the stuff at Kirisu and put that virtually, we had a lot of people who said, this is the first time we're seeing a drag show. This is the first time that we're seeing all these queer artists. And so the exposure, of course, over there is much bit larger. But of course, I think the thrill of being in a concert and seeing an orchestra live, or, seeing a symphony, which can be gotten through the computer, but I don't know what the future is going to be like for concerts, because that's probably the last thing that any country would also open up, and so I think that it's just a concern. That's not really a thing, but at the same time, I think the virtual model, whatever we can do when we reach out virtually, but then we have to remember that not everything that was physical can be converted virtually. So not that everything that we were doing on a daily basis, even when it comes to live performance, can it all be shifted to the virtual model? I don't think it's possible, and also correct to do so. So I guess navigating this new normal and making sure that all the fabulous work that we did in bringing people together continues in this, virtual reality.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I very much like what you advise in terms of using clear reason to establish what the challenges really are, but somehow using that motivation of the, as you say, the fabulous of the work that we've done so far to kind of find a way. Helena, challenges and solutions potentially.
Yeah, I think all these things come down to political and society issues. The challenges we see are often political challenges. And I wish that Jeunesse Musicale could help all of us to raise awareness on how we can use music and culture to work with inclusion and all these very, very important questions. And I mean, Jeunesse Musicale started for a reason, 1945, and we need to continue to work with these questions, with human rights and culture, and the right to express yourself. And I really hope that Jeunesse Musicale and all of us can be inspired by each other and continue this work together.
That's really interesting what you say about, I suppose, in a way, advocating to those with power, and using that power to make change and share the progress together, I suppose, if that's an accurate reflection. Sophie, from your perspective, what do you think?
Obviously an easy question to finish up with. But if I can try to kind of build on what you and Helena was just saying, I guess it would be working towards actually shifting the power. I still have the sense that a lot of the work is done from a pretty privileged place for like marginalized or less privileged or whatever, how you choose to define it, but to actually work on that shifting of power in our organizations, in our boards, in the organizing groups, to make sure that the projects are actually what they're supposed to be, because I don't think they can ever be like what they should be unless the people therefore are actually in power and making the decisions on the projects. So I guess that's a never-ending project that's coming up now.
Yeah,
Very important. Very important.
It sounds like that project is, reflective, asking questions of, are we really fulfilling what we said we wanted to fulfill, and continuing to do that and shouting that we should all do that all together, and then hopefully maybe we can, through these dialogues and through asking questions to ourselves and others, we can find some answers slowly but surely. I feel like through this discussion, I can really tell you, I feel much more inspired to just keep persevering during this time after everything that you guys have shared. I really mean that. It's a bewildering moment that we're living in, but I really feel the more that even just these simple exchanges that we can have, the more that we have fuel to fire up our engines and push that little bit further. And I think we will together. So thank you very much, all of you, for your time and your inspiration and for everything that you do day to day. I look forward to another opportunity where we can do this, hopefully in person. And wish you all the best with your projects.
Thank you so much, Omar.
Thank you.
you.